My name is Lori Reynolds. I'm a lieutenant general, a retired lieutenant general in the Marine Corps. One of my running mates here throughout my time, David Furness, currently the superintendent of the Virginia Military Institute, also a retired Marine lieutenant general. Dave, I'm just looking forward to having a little conversation with you. I feel like I could answer these questions for you, but
You
the more
probably
the more that we can swap stories, I think the better we'll be. So, first off, I'll just, how are you doing? How is everything going at VMI right now? And
well,
is it
we just been through a rather contentious legislative session in Virginia. So it's a 60-day session. It's very fast. I think all the experience that I might have gained at the federal level really didn't do me much good at the state level. It operates far faster than the federal level. I was in a hearing where a committee passed 60 bills out of committee in about 2 hours. And Congress doesn't do that in like 5 years.
right?
So it's very quick. They've got a job to do. They're not permanent legislators, so they have other day jobs. So they got to go get in Richmond, get the job done, and get back to work. So the pace was a bit. I was in Richmond a lot, 2, 3 days a week, and you're starting from a point where nobody knows who you are. I don't have any relationships
Right.
in a domain that requires relationships in order to be effective. So it was very challenging and learned a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully I will be better prepared for the 45-day session in 2027. They alternate between 60 and 45-day sessions. So next session will be even quicker,
Yeah.
but I'll be hopefully a little bit better prepared.
General Furness and I are both on the International Council for the American Battle Monuments Foundation, and so we're just pleased to have this conversation this morning. Um, General Furness has, as you look through his bio, Dave, you've done everything. You did everything that you define success in our Corps. Command at every rank, an infantry officer who commanded in conflict. Um, you were an instructor. We only in the Marine Corps we only make our best officers our instructors at our officer um, training schools for us. That's the basic school and infantry officer course. So, by any measure, General Furness had a very, very successful Marine Corps career, and I was just pleased to walk alongside him for so much of it. We spent time as recruiting station commanders together, so we understand that's kind of the lifeblood of the Marine Corps is to kind of continue to be out and about and bringing young men and women into our Corps. And so just a variety of experiences as a general officer. Um, uh, Dave, you spent time, probably more time than anybody, in the legislative area of the Marine Corps as our representative on the Hill. And so just as a backdrop, that's just so proud of you, Dave, for your career and the officer that you were, the friend that you were. So when you look back, David, across your Marine Corps career, what is there a moment that best captures why you chose to serve?
Well, I think initially I chose to serve. I came of age with kind of Ronald Reagan as being president, and he kind of energized America to be proud of itself, to that we were worth defending. It was towards the end of the Cold War, and there were good guys and bad guys in the world, and I felt this would be a noble profession. I had no idea when I started it that I was going to stay 36 years, but I felt that service to the country was important, and I wanted to do my part. And so that idea kind of led me to VMI to be educated, I thought, in a manner that would put me on the best footing to be a professional Marine officer. That's really kind of what brought that to my attention and inspired me to begin the journey. And then, like you said, I was just extremely fortunate to have been given opportunities at almost every rank to lead Marines, and develop myself professionally, both in by instructing, but also attending professional military education courses. And so it was really, you kind of look back and it went very quickly. I didn't, it's like you say 36 years, it's like, oh my God, that's a long time, but it went like that. And the opportunity to come here was just an opportunity to put the uniform back on and then get into a role where you could inspire the next generation of young men and women, morally sound, ethically balanced, civil leaders that I think our country needs now, more than ever. And that's always been a passion of mine, is giving back to the young men and women that you are responsible for, and trying to make them better versions of themselves first, and then better Marines and sailors second. And I just when this opportunity presented itself, I threw my hat in the ring, and I was fortunate enough to be selected. So
Do you remember, being there at VMI as a student? And do you remember the day when you said, I'm going to be a Marine? Or was that a gradual thing for you?
well, no, so I wanted to be a Marine before. It took me a couple times to get into VMI, and so I didn't think actually that was ever going to happen. So I went and got in the platoon leaders class program, and so the May of '83, I went to Camp Upshur, for 8 weeks or so, and that and not knowing that at the end I was going to have my acceptance letter, because I was accepted way, way late eventually to the class. And so my preparation, I showed up, and probably the first mistake I made at VMI of many was wearing a Marine Corps polo shirt, and I had a high and tight because I just got out of Camp Upshur. The suntan lines for the
Yeah.
cover there. And so I was kind of marked as a Marine while everybody else was getting a haircut. I was doing push-ups. So I got introduced to the deck here. And then I was calling the deck and the hatch to hatch, and aye, aye, sir. And they like knocked that sailor talk off. And, your head's swimming and people are screaming at you. And so, but I knew I wanted to be a Marine before I came here. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of why I chose this location. You couldn't Google things back then, but I had read a book, Marine, The Life of Chesty Puller, and he went here for a year before he tried to get into World War One. So he's still considered, we consider a member of a class if you've getting through the rat line. So if you've done the first year, you're always a member of that class. So he's a member of the class of 21. And then you started, okay, General Lejeune was the fifth superintendent here. You had two commandants in the 50s that attended here, and you started reading about that, and you're like, okay, this is probably a good place to be, built into a Marine officer. And so you just you accepted the challenge. And it was, everything they claimed it was going to be, a little bit more probably.
So, David, throughout your career, my career, and probably even now, as you are sitting there as the superintendent of VMI, we all worry about, recruiting the next generation. And, here's an opportunity for you to talk about what do most people get wrong about military service, right? What is it? How is there a way that we can demystify what it means to serve today? Are there any thoughts there from you?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think most people associate it with your entry level experience, which is vastly different than the service after the experience. I
Hmm.
think, because um, we transform a civilian into a soldier, sailor, airman, or marine in that entry level accession pipeline. First, we look for the right material, and there's some attributes that we screen for, and then we put those individuals in a training regime that trains the mind, hardens the body to get ready for military service. And I think, and it's difficult, but I think people think that's the way it's going to be for 40 years or whatever. It's not. I mean, it sets your daily habits. It establishes the framework for how you're going to serve. But we don't have people screaming and yelling at you 24/7 for all those years. And quite frankly, the mistake I made as a junior leader, probably, and most make, is they 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 start leading like they were led through the pipeline, which doesn't necessarily translate to great results when you're in an operational unit where people are looking at you like, chill out, we get it, we're professionals too. And so you have to adapt. You learn that, and I think over time, become you see different leadership styles, and then you kind of adapt to kind of who you want to become as a leader. You see some, I don't want to be like that. I see others, hey, I'd really like to be that way. Um, but I think the misconception is that it's all kind of that. They miss the camaraderie. I mean, I think the thing people said, what do you miss the most about in retirement, and it's the people. I
Yeah.
mean, just the quality of young men and women who are wearing the same uniform, doing the same job, working together in the same team, selflessly, and you're surrounded by these folks. And then they have real life challenges, and you're helping them overcome them while accomplishing the mission. There's huge satisfaction in that. And I think the mission's important. It's vital to the country. You're working long hours, yeah, but like, again, the time flies by. You don't really look at the clock. You just look at, hey, did we get things done today? We need to get done. Okay, everybody go home. But so I think that's a misconception. The great aspects of service, um, they don't see, because these intangible things you kind of experience to actually feel. But there's a huge sense of accomplishment. I mean, once you get through, and part of entry level training is they make it difficult so that there is a sense of, hey, you can do anything, you can accomplish this. You're capable, you're resilient, and it is difficult, and depending on what service, and if special forces more difficult than what I did, but there's a kind of like a cascading scale, but there's obstacles to be overcome no matter what you do. And there's a huge sense of, hey, I actually did something difficult and important, and I should be proud of myself, and I'm capable of doing difficult things well. And there's huge satisfaction in that individually. And then when you build a unit and actually do those things collectively, there's a huge sense of accomplishment in a unit.
Yeah, I certainly, I'm over here nodding my head up and down because, when less than 1% of our nation serves in uniform, so many people just, what they see on television or, is just so not what it is, right? What it is just as you just described it, which is it's about the intangible kind of things. And you and I are both on recruiting duty. This is what we sold. We didn't sell travel and adventure. We sold be a better human being, right?
Yeah.
Test yourself, become mentally and morally upright. Um, and I just, David, my time at Paris Island, watching so many graduations and so many family members just not believe the change in their young Marine, right? At graduation. And because we changed their lives, and you got to believe that. You got to believe it's worth it to help people change. And so I'm glad that you have an opportunity to do that, to continue to do that. So
Well, there's so many parallels, at least I see, between the Marine Corps and how we recruited the talent to get in the door to train. Colleges are facing a demographic cliff. There's less 18-year-olds, and so quite frankly, since I've gotten here, we are working on, we're not really organized for that fight the way we need to be, because I think heretofore we've just, hey, people are going to get interested in VMI. We'll offer, open house weekends. They'll come, they'll put an application in, we accept them, they'll come. And, we've got a business model, right now, we've had 5 years of declining enrollments. And so we should have we should start every year, 1,700 plus, because you start bleeding,
Yeah.
people start leaving, they just, oh, this isn't for me, and they boom, they're gone. Excuse me, right from the get go. And so if we don't start at that level, that becomes a fiscal hole in your budget that you don't ever get back. People don't transfer into schools like this and like they're soft,
Right.
like,
Right. Right.
you have to start at the beginning. And so most people don't want to do that. And so I'm trying to set up, like organize ourselves. I call it organized for combat because I'm a simple infantry guy. But we don't have a marketing branding firm that like fights in the information space for us. We don't have a recruiter. We have admissions, but you first got to get them interested to apply. And then when you accept them, then you got to contact them after the sale, so to speak, and make sure that they're coming. So we're trying to set up an organization like that. And so our experience as an RSCO, like Marine systematic recruiting, I'm actually interviewing some retired O6s with that experience that can come in here and write my volume 3 for me and leverage my 71 alumni chapters as recruiting stations to go reach out to the 4 corners of America and get the word out. We're actually um, in conversations with Thomson as a marketing firm because they get the market. Like they told us, they said, look, there might be 3.4 million 18-year-olds in America every year, and that number's decreasing. But your market is about 200,000. Like you
Yeah.
don't have most of
Yeah.
these kids won't even think about doing what you're asking them to do. And so it's about getting the benefits of the service, what we're going to do. And I go around, I was just in 2 high schools yesterday in Richmond, kind of giving career day talks, you know, and I'm like, hey, look, if you commit and embrace the process that we're going to afford you the opportunity to do, will completely transform your life. I guarantee you that. And you can't even imagine how much better you'll be if you do that. And what I've seen in the 5 or 6 months I've been here is it's really interesting because when I went here, it was an all male institution. And what I've been most surprised about is just how eye-wateringly good our female cadets are. Because I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't seen female cadets. You're like, well, I've been around a lot of female Marines, but not at here. And what I've seen is, and it probably has something to do with, female brains are more mature at an earlier age than their male counterparts. They just embrace the system. They try to get every ounce out of it. And you have we have 3 battalions here. They're all commanded by women who are all commissioning. They're all double majors. They all have above a 3.5. There are 2 of them are NCAA athletes. I mean, it's like, holy mackerel, what don't you do? And I think that, when you just commit to the process, like I'm gonna go to all the speaker events. I'm gonna try to get as much out of this experience as I possibly can. It's just exceptional what you see
Yeah.
the growth from the first day that they're here to even the end of the first year. And it's impressive. And it's just great to be part of that. So we've got to organize ourselves better to get our message out to more people, to penetrate the market, to get in front of people with cadets. Our best messengers are cadets, just like PTAD Marines. Like, hey, this guy was, the bane of the guidance counselor in high school X, and now look at him or her, you know,
Yeah.
and people can't believe the transformation that can happen. And
Yeah.
then here it's a 4 year kind of, and you can see the maturation process over a 4 year cadetship. And when you listen to them ask questions at a speaker event where somebody's presented a book, or they're talking about a topic, and they get up at the microphone and they ask a question like, holy mackerel, I'm not sure I was thinking like that when I
Yeah.
was 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just, it just thrills you to be part of that process.
I'm pretty sure, David, that, I went to the Naval Academy, but I'm pretty sure that if I was trying to do that today, I would not be as competitive as these are
Oh,
incredible,
they are.
very talented young people going through these systems. And, I think importantly, you don't have to give 36 years of your life after, coming through an organization like VMI or the Naval Academy. Just 4 years makes a difference,
Oh,
right? Those 4 years that you and I spent as platoon commanders or company commanders, and you come out of your military service, with that on your resume and all that says. It could mean conflict. It could mean bringing people with you into dangerous places, but it's leadership, it's management, it's everything. You are responsible for lives as an officer, and the responsibility that means is that you are growing up really fast.
no, I think I try to sell because what we don't have, when I was here, we had mandatory commissioning. Everybody, now everybody has to take ROTC classes every semester that they're here, even if you're not commissioning. It's like that's part of your leadership development aspect of coming here. And I'm trying to increase about 60% of the core commission, and I'm trying to increase that. And I try to, one person at a time, hey, have you thought about this? And just showing the action plan, like, okay, look, say you get commissioned, do 4 years, you come out, you got a post 9/11 GI Bill. Now you go to grad school for business, you get an MBA. Now you're competing, you got an MBA that the government paid for. You got 4 years of practical leadership experience that nobody else has. You're confident in front of people. You've led organizations. You've managed budgets, and you're still 29
Five.
years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you've got a lot, your whole life ahead of you, but you're so much farther ahead than your peer group. It's not even funny. So
Right.
this is really, don't look at it. I mean, we all should, I believe everybody should serve. I think it's important. The country's worth serving. Um, but it's also the benefit you're going to, like, what's in it for me is that you're developing yourself so that at that late 20s period, you're the best version of yourself. You've got all the street cred credentials, 2 degrees, and you can do that, especially if you go on a ROTC scholarship. You don't have any undergrad bills, you don't have any grad school bills. I mean, you're so far ahead of your peer group. And then if you enjoyed serving, you always stay in the reserves and do that as well. Can keep the connection, but you're still far ahead of most of the people that you're going to be competing with. And when people look at that resume, they're like, "That's a sure bet." You
Yeah.
know. Now,
Yeah.
whether is you think about it, even like a surface warfare officer, officer of the deck on a U.S. destroyer, BMD mission in Persian Gulf, a lot of responsibility there. you know, and you can do that at 24 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I just think we put so much responsibility in your hands at such a young, impressionable age, where that development occurs very rapid. Like you said, platoon commander, company commander. I mean, you're leading 200 souls, responsible for everything about them. I mean, that means things out in the real world. I mean, you've been tested, you've proven yourself. They know you could do difficult things well, and so
Yeah.
that's what I try to sell to increase, people's interest in commissioning, because I would like to get it up around 75%. That's probably unattainable, but you never know until you try. So,
Dave, let's stay on this tack for just a minute. So we're talking about leadership. We're talking about the value of service, but in your own career. I know in mine, when I look back at, my vision as a young lieutenant and captain, it's about 10 feet out in front of me. And then the longer that you stay in, the greater responsibility you have, the greater obligation I think we have to the service itself,
Yes.
right? Where we're balancing the needs of the individual with the needs of the service. Can you talk about that in your own career and what that journey looked like for you? And then what does that mean now as you're leading VMI?
Great question. And it's so true. I mean, I think as a junior officer, lieutenant, captain, even major, though I think major is an inflection point. RSCO was obviously an inflection point. But that first part of your career, when I was a platoon commander and then I was an instructor, a tactics officer at the basic school, and I came back as a company commander, and then I rolled right in to be a battalion operations officer. I was learning my profession day in, day out. Even when I was a teacher, that's what I was teaching. So I was continually learning more and more about being an infantry officer, what that meant, how to do it right. I thought the funnest job I ever had, I used to say stealing money from the government, was being a company commander, 29 Palms, 95 to 97. And, just the built, and I took the company over and literally had like 40 Marines in the company. It's supposed to be about 200. I had 40. Built the thing over, the course of the next year, and a half, and then deployed it to Okinawa, trained it hard in Okinawa in the jungle, which was vastly different than training at 29 Palms, so
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and it was a good experience in the sense of what you worked on was different, but it was still part of your infantry job jar. But vegetation was different. And then going to Thailand, being lat training company for 2 months with the Thai Army, and then rolling right into being the battalion OPSO, which was like the shell answer man of the battalion. You're running everything. People are coming to you, and you're really at the pinnacle of like your operational expertise at that battalion and below level of warfighting. And then you get a call that says you got to be in Sacramento by the end of the week, and don't call there. We haven't fired the guy yet. And you're like, okay, and you don't have any idea what you're getting in for. The words are different, the acronyms are different, and
This is
but
going from infantry to recruiting. Yeah.
infantry recruiting. But the commonality there is the leadership skills that you've been developing since you were a cadet and then a lieutenant all the way through. It's like, okay, I don't really still know what this organization does, but here's how we're going to run it. Just doing common sense things. Like if it didn't make sense, it probably shouldn't have been being done. Like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Like a junior guy working for a senior guy, a senior guy working for a junior guy, like, wait a minute, we don't do that in the Marine Corps. So I think that experience like broadened my understanding of the institution, because you're selling the institution every day for 3 years to principals, guidance counselors, state legislators, who knows. And um, and so you have a great, and everybody that you have every MOS in the menagerie there, that every MOSs you've never even heard of,
Yeah.
they're working for you. So you learn about what those Marines, what their skill set is. You can't, I learned I couldn't lead them exactly like you led a bunch of 03, 11s and 41s, 31s. And you had to, adjust your style a bit to the conditions, the battlefield you were on. I think that was an incredibly important experience, because as you move up levels, you deal more with leading through intent, because you can't supervise the entire organization. A company, you can almost like follow me. Everybody's you can touch them all almost all
You
the
can
time.
lock eyes with them every morning. Yeah.
Right. Battalion, regiment, division, you can't do that. And so um, you really have to be good at communicating, good at influencing when you're not there physically. And in those skills, you have to be developed. And quite frankly, I developed them as CEO of RS Sacramento. I mean, because you're spread out, 300,000 square miles,
Yeah,
Nevada, half of
yeah,
California, 14 different stations. You're running around trying to see everybody and supervise it, and it's very difficult. And you learn how to lead through intent. You learn how to inspire, and a mission, truthfully, that most of these young Marines don't really want to do. They didn't sign up for.
right.
It's different.
Yeah,
It's challenging. It's also credibly negative. You make 100 phone calls, you might talk to 10 people. You
yeah,
get the phone hung up on you all day. You go knock on doors for a PPC, no, boom.
yeah,
So I think leading in that environment matured me as a leader,
mhm,
gave me skills that would be very, like fighting an insurgency in Iraq is a lot like commanding a recruiting station in that you were spread way out and you
yeah,
couldn't get to everybody all the time. And you had to be very clear about what you expected them to do, how you expected them to do it. And then you correct it as you were able to do battlefield circulation. The mission was hard to get your head around. There were a lot of difficulties to be overcome. And so for me, I felt very like, okay, I've done this kind of thing before, different, not life or death, but in Marine Corps recruiting, you make mission, man. I mean, we don't accept too many, excuses. And so I just think it was a transformational inflection point in my career. And then everything after was, I thought, easier than that. And I'm like, well, if I can do this, I can do that. I mean, and so, but the management aspect of it, because you're managing a lot, the budgets get bigger, the complexity of the organization gets more complex. You're dealing with staffs, which has different expertise that advise you. You're listening to information, making decisions. And so it's a very good progression. I felt like I remember thinking when I was a company commander, like I could be the battalion commander right now. Nah, probably not. Like there's a reason that we go through these experiences before we give you more responsibility. And I thought the Marine Corps did a very, very good job of preparing me
yeah,
for the next level, before they gave me the opportunity to serve at that level. So
yeah. So when you're sitting and you were a division commander, which is, as a two-star, you've got regiments and battalions and companies and under you. Can you explain to those listening, David, when you make a decision as a division commander that might put, you know, necessarily might put Marines in harm's way, how do you handle that responsibility? How do you, number one, understanding that that decision is the last thing you do. It's all the training, it's all the prep, it's all of the things that we do to prepare our Marines for that decision. But how do you as a leader handle those responsibilities when you have to make that decision that may send Marines off?
great question and very true. I think early on, I think, Al Gray to our generation of officers said, hey, you got to be a professional at your profession, which means most of the time, you have to prepare yourself by yourself, which is you have to be a voracious reader. You have to be a student of your profession. There's a lot of self-study involved. I had a tight infantry peer group that you bounce ideas off of and have these discussions over the telephone. Guys like Sparky Renforth, Dale Alford, and vigorous debates about what the right way to do this was. So you're developing yourself. I always felt that I needed to prepare myself mentally as well as I could for that eventuality to make that decision so that I could make the best decision that I could make, not worrying about making the perfect one, but being timely and shaping the environment for my Marine success. And if I did that, then the decision, especially in combat, is you make the decision, you keep assessing, you keep sensing the environment, and you may have to adjust it 5 times on the way to mission accomplishment. but I mean, that's your job. And I had prepared myself for that. I never really found myself in any combat situation where it's like I didn't know what to do. And but that was tons of TDGs, tons of reading, tons of discussion with really competent professionals. Your elders, the guys who raised me when I was a lieutenant were guys like Ripley and Smith, and you listen to every word they said about how they did their job in fighting and their experiences, and all of that is what allows you to make that decision in a time compressed environment, life or death on the
Yeah.
line. But if you haven't done all that
Yeah.
work, then it can be,
Yeah.
I imagine it could be pretty daunting and, kind of intimidating. But I think the Marine Corps is pretty good about making sure you have done the work.
Right.
And that's why I always felt well prepared for those circumstances that you encountered in Iraq and Afghanistan and Panama, later in Somalia, that you just weren't confused by,
Right.
you weren't worried about, am I getting it 100% right? You assess what you can assess, you make a decision, and you keep assessing, and you're there. You're as close to the point of contact as you can be, so that you can influence the action and understand kind of what's happening, and then make adjustments as required, and then get to
Yeah.
accomplishment. And I think the Marine Corps instills in its officers a bias for action. And from the time I was a lieutenant, they just preached that. Like, you've got to take action, make decisions, and continue to attack. That's your job. The preparation of the unit, I always found to be the most enjoyable, because it's like being a coach. Like, with,
Right.
I was not a very good athlete, but an athlete, and so you like the preparation for the event, the training, the practice, and you use a lot of those experiences of do it again, do it again, do it again, to get it, to build that muscle memory in organizations, so that when you give them an order, their instant obedience to it leads to effective action that you practiced numbers of times. And then you just, I tell you what, when I first, you watch like a Marine organization unleash itself on the enemy, and like all the training that you did, you can look at it and it being executed right in front of you. It's a pretty awe-inspiring view. And
Yeah.
and it again gives you a lot of job satisfaction. Now, there's a lot of risks there, and people are getting hurt, and you don't like that, but the ability to do that together against in a very adverse situation and environment, and accomplish something meaningful, was always, I found, very fulfilling.
Bringing this full circle then, Dave, you said when we began this conversation that, one of the reasons why you took this job was just, just an opportunity to wear the uniform again, and to kind of have a like mission, if you will, of transforming lives. What would be first off, whose voice do you hear in your head most often as you're sitting in your office saying, what should I do about whether it's the legislative session or the budget, or, who is that mentor that has the loudest voice in your head? And, do you feel like the folks, those young people that you have, are they different in any way than the young Marines that you and I got to lead in our 36 years? Yeah,
Uh,
go
they
ahead.
that's an easy one. No, they they're just as inspiring, just as, they want to be great. They want to, test themselves. That's why you come to a place like the Naval Academy or VMI. There's a chance you can get an education at places far easier, with a lot less hassle. But, I also say I don't know that the end state output, like what you can become, I think, individually is far lower at other places than it is at an academy or a place like VMI. So they're fantastic. I mean, our first captain, our senior cadet in barracks, is going to commission in the Marine Corps, and he's like a poster. Like, he's 6'4", 200 pounds, wiry, great leader, articulate, caring, and you're like, you know what's in front of him.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, you're just going to go leave this place and just start knocking the ball out of the park, and it's going to be such an amazing journey for as long as you want to devote yourself to it. And they're just like the young sailors and Marines and that's the greatest part of the job, quite honestly. The voice in my head, I know when, I called Bob Neller after my first, I had to testify, right? And I
Yeah.
just said, no, sir, it's far easier to do the job I did for you and be behind the guy sitting with the
So
microphone in the face.
so for those listening, Bob Neller was our commandant that Dave and I both served with as 3 stars.
And so I just said, sir, I just have a greater appreciation for just the weight of the institution that really, like everything that happens or doesn't happen here at VMI is on my shoulders. For the Marine Corps, it's on the Commandant's shoulders. You kind of understand that, but I think until you're on the X, feeling the weight of that, every word matters, and you're trying to be very deliberate in what you say. So I called him up and told him I have far greater appreciation for you this afternoon, sir, that maybe I did. And I loved working for him. And he was the division commander when I was a battalion commander in combat in Iraq. So we worked together multiple times, but it's the realization that when you're on that X and you have to represent your institution and there is nobody else, it's I hear him and Dunford and Amos and Conway in my ear. I work for all those gentlemen, and it's I have a great appreciation for carrying that weight now, like probably more than I did before I took this job, I think.
If you could give one piece of advice to your 22-year-old self, what would it be?
Enjoy the ride. I think too often I was very deliberate and like I was a better first lieutenant than I was a second lieutenant. I was a better captain than I was I always tried to improve. And I think if I had one, skill set, it was being very introspective on myself and like, okay, you got to get better at that. And trying to work on those aspects. One of the characteristics or know yourself and seek self-improvement, I think we said. And I think that's important. And I'm not, get me wrong, but enjoy the journey because
Yeah.
it's when you look back on it. I was just talking to Dale Alford last night. He said, yeah, I'm going to work a few more years and then I'm going to hunt and fish and play golf. And I'm like, I want to do the same thing and maybe we can do them together, because it's really like I met him. We were both first lieutenants. He asked to co-share a range with me. We were both 81 platoon commanders. He was in 3-6. I was in 2-8, and he called up out of the blue. You could and people think he talks like a redneck now. You should have heard him as a second or a first lieutenant. I mean, barely understand him. And we shot mortars for a week together out on the Gulf 10 impact area, Camp Lejeune, and have been like literally, best friends ever since. We were company commanders in Okinawa together. We went to command staff together. We were on recruiting duty together. You have these great relationships, and I'm not saying I didn't enjoy that, but I mean, you don't really treasure that journey until kind of you're looking back on it and realizing how great it was, what great people
Yeah.
and that we hung out with and got to hang out with, serve with, dive into really difficult problem sets together. And I think that's what I would tell my 22-year-old self. Yeah, you got to do all this stuff. You got to improve yourself. You got to work hard at it, but don't forget to have fun and enjoy it because it's a great ride.
David, thank you. Good luck to you at VMI.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Right.
Good to see you.